me, fifth element. Supreme being. Me, protect you.
You have 48 hours. That's the length of time it needs to adapt itself to our living conditions.
And then?
And then it will be too late. The goal of this thing is not to fight over money, power, but to exterminate life. All forms of life.
So what you're telling me, Father, there's nothing that can stop this.
There is only one thing. The Montechiwan have in their possession the only weapon to defeat evil. 4 elements. Gathered around a fifth. The supreme being, the ultimate warrior, created to protect life. Together they produce what the ancients called the light of creation, able to bring life to the farthest reaches of the universe. But if evil stands there,
then what?
Then light turns to dark, life to death, forever.
My favorite.
Lilu Dallas multipack.
Unbelievable!
The summer of 1997, The Fifth Element arrived on the big screen and stormed to the #1 spot in many countries around the world. Costing over $90 million, it was the most expensive European film ever made at the time. Thankfully, it made over $260 million worldwide, making the movie a financial success. But it didn't draw big numbers in the United States, only pulling in just over $60 million. It made most of its income in Europe, but I'm surprised it didn't do better. Reviews at the time were very positive, but the film did polarise some critics, especially at Cannes, where it opened the 50th Cannes Film Festival, some saying it was one of the best summer movies and one of the worst. Luc Besson first conceived the story when he was a child. He invented the world of Fifth Element to escape his own, having a very lonely childhood. He wrote loads of short stories over the years and built upon them, ending up with a 400-page script. Obviously, it had to be sized down when he decided to move forward in getting it on the big screen. During his career, he had great success with Nikita and Atlantis, and during that time the process of getting Fifth Element on the big screen was very much on his mind, apparently taking 9 years for it to come together. With the help of Hollywood screenwriter Robert Mark Kamen, he and Luke simplified the script, making it a suitable length for theatres. The movie took a year to develop and design. During that time, the effects Luc Besson wanted to achieve wasn't possible, and the computers needed wouldn't be ready for another year or two to really give him the best results. So before he started filming any footage, he went off and made Leon the Professional. With Leon being his first movie with an English-speaking cast, it gave him the experience needed to help deal with the Fifth Element, taking off some of the pressure. Once the computers were ready, they could push the visual effects he wanted. When it came together to shooting footage in 1996, they used 9 sound stages at Pinewood Studios and took over the London Royal Opera House for the memorable performance of the diva. Shooting lasted for 109 days. Luc wanted to create a credible looking future. Famous French comic book artists Moebius and Jean-Claude Mézières helped design the world of the 23rd century. Every item in the film had to be designed and created. Nothing could exist that was from our time, even down to the smallest thing like Corbin cigarettes. Every piece of technology in the movie had to be something that had evolved over time, so there was a believable functionality to it. Luc Besson had said the backstory to the film was the world was on the brink of World War III, but once they had discovered space travel, allowing them to travel at the speed of light across the galaxy, the world came together and resolved their differences, uniting as one. So for example, the city of New York became a great mix of different cultures, a lot like LA in Blade Runner. World famous fashion designer Jean-Paul Gaultier took on the challenge of creating all the outfits and clothes of the future. They were praised for being intellectually transgressive. John Paul's designs were said to challenge sexuality and gender norms. Many of the costumes, for example, at the Royal Opera House have a mix of designs from throughout history, and many outfits look like they came from the 18th century. Every design was bright and colourful. You rarely saw anything that looked bland or grey. Chris Tucker, from what I've read, wasn't too happy with the outfits he received. I think he was a little concerned what his friends and family would think when they saw him. The Fifth Element has a huge selection of international actors. You've got action superstar Bruce Willis playing the hero, Corbin Dallas. Newcomer at the time, Mila Jovovich, who was chosen out of 5,000 other women who auditioned for the part. The Fifth Element is still her personal favourite movie she has worked on. The divine language spoken in the film is a fictional language with only 400 words, invented by Luke and Mila. Mila stated that she and Besson wrote letters to each other in the divine language as practice. The ultimate 90s villain, Gary Oldman, plays the industrialist Zorg. Gary had just starred in Leon and was more than happy to work with Luc Besson again. He apparently wasn't too keen on the ludicrous hairpiece they gave him. The always fantastic Ian Holmes plays the priest in charge of protecting the stones and making sure they don't fall into the wrong hands. Chris Tucker plays the DJ Ruby Rod in probably his most eccentric performance to date. Chris wanted to play him as a mix of Prince and Michael Jackson. Tommy Lister plays the president. Very surprising, as I'm so used to him playing the bad guy. And at the time I'd just seen him in Friday playing Debo, which also starred Chris Tucker. If you've seen the film Friday, you will certainly not want to mess with him, unless you're Ice Cube of course. Brian James, who plays the General Monroe, probably gives one of his finest performances. I've seen him in loads of generic action movies from the 80s, and I'm sure most will recognise him as Leon from Blade Runner. But it is great to see him acting in something more comedic, which he seems to be a natural at. He unfortunately passed away in 1999. You've got loads of famous models, pop stars, even UK jockey Chris Moyles getting a minor role, which is totally bizarre. But my favourite supporting actor is British stand-up comedian Lee Evans. Many viewers outside the UK will remember him from Mouse Hunt and Something About Mary. Lee Evans has been doing stand-up comedy for years and is still one of the best around.
Summer is here. Summer is here. We don't even know what the sun looks like in this country, do we? As soon as the sun goes out in Britain, people go, ah! What's that? Straight away, it's the sun! Burn me! Burn me! Oh, yeah. So 5 hours after they're gone, I'm burning. Don't touch me.
The movie opens in 1914, where an archaeologist has made the discovery of a lifetime. He reads out an ancient passage which tells of a weapon consisting of 4 stones, representing the 4 classic elements, and a sarcophagus that contains Fifth Element in the form of a human, which combines the power of the 4 elements into a divine light that can defeat evil. Aliens known as the Mondoshaans arrive at the ancient Egyptian temple to collect the only weapon capable of defeating the great evil, which appears every 5,000 years. The Mondoshaans promised their contact, a priest at the time who was trying to keep the weapon a secret, that they will return with the elements in time to stop the evil, which will occur in 3 centuries. The film then leaps forward to the 23rd century. The great evil, also known as Mr. Shadow, has appeared in space in the form of a giant ball of black fire and is attacking and destroying Earth's battleships. The current Mondoshaan contact, Priest Vito Cornelius, informs President Lindbergh of the history of the great evil and the 5 elements that can stop it. As the Mondoshaans return to Earth, they are ambushed by Mangalores, a race hired by a ruthless industrialist called Zorg, who was instructed by the great evil to acquire the stones. The Mondoshaans spacecraft is destroyed. The only recoverable item is a hand of the 5th element. The scientists take the hand to a New York City laboratory, using it to reconstruct a humanoid woman known as Lilu. Described as perfect. Terrified by her unfamiliar surroundings, she escapes confinement and is chased down by the police. She jumps off a ledge only to land in the flying taxicab of Corbin Dallas, a divorcee and former major in the Special Forces. Dallas escapes the cops and delivers Lilu to Cornelius and his apprentice David, whereupon Cornelius learns that the 4 element stones were entrusted to the alien opera singer called the Diva. Zorg, angered by the Mangalore's failure to obtain the stones, attempts to kill them, but some of them survive and try to obtain the stones for themselves. Upon learning from the Mondoshaans that the Diva has the stones, General Monroe, Dallas's former superior, re-enlists Corbin and orders him to travel undercover as a rigged radio contest winner to meet the Diva on a luxury cruise and get the 4 elements needed to save the world. A Effects company Digital Domain was hired to take on the large majority of the visual effects for Fifth Element. The movie has a great mix of miniatures, in-camera effects, green screen and CGI. The effects still thankfully hold up, especially on Blu-ray. There are a number of shots where it clearly looks like an effect and comes across as a bit too digital, looking overly sharp and closely resembling a video game. The floating ship never really looked effective to me, and when Leeloo jumps off the building to escape from the police, it turns into a CG double that looks very weak even for 1997 standards. The city of New York is definitely the most impressive aspect of the movie, and was the most challenging aspect for the visual effects team. It's so crowded and packed with detail, it's amazing to look at, and a great achievement for the time. It's like the anti-Blade Runner, nothing dark and smoky about it, it's all about light and brightness. British creature effects designer Nick Dudman, who had worked on Star Wars, Labyrinth and Batman, created amazing puppets and animatronic heads to help visualise many of the alien-like monsters throughout the film. The latest silicone gel technology was used heavily with the Mangalords, and many things were experimental with their design, but they still use the traditional radio-controlled mechanics for the heads. The diva apparently for the second part of the song was supposed to have wings with added CG elements, but after viewing the rushes the performance was so strong they decided to leave the wings out. Mr. Dudman said it was at a time when creature effects teams had to work closely with the visual effects crew to help achieve the best results, thus making things more economic on the production. The movie went on to win a BAFTA for its visual effects, beating Titanic. The composer Eric Serra teams up again with Luc Besson to provide another score for him. He previously provided his talents on Leon, and many will remember his work on GoldenEye. The soundtrack is just as wacky as the film in many areas. It has a great mix of jazz, electronic compositions and a full-blown orchestral tracks, with the standout operatic piece with the diva. The soundtrack often makes my playlist when I'm working just for background music. I like the chilled out jazzy moments and the performance of the diva. The soundtrack sold over 200,000 copies alone just in France, and runs at 63 minutes long, much longer than the average soundtrack you usually see released. From what I've seen online, I don't think there is an official complete score, but there are many bootlegs floating around. The official release from '97 is easily obtainable on iTunes. PlayStation owners got the unfortunate opportunity to play the game based on the film. It was a clunky carbon copy of Tomb Raider. The game's camera struggles to follow the player around the levels and exhibits that typical late 90s 3D clipping and pop-up that was apparent in some of the early 32-bit generation consoles. The game also lets you choose which character you want to be, Corbin or Leeloo. Some missions you are restricted to a certain character as you try to obtain the 4 other elements. The controls are totally broken, and many gamers found it very frustrating. When it came to timing your jumps, it was so difficult. Also, the game was riddled with annoying puzzles throughout the levels, which drove players nuts. The game does include music from the film and also some good quality FMV cut sequences, but that doesn't make a good game. It's total garbage, to be honest. Don't waste your money on it unless you see it on eBay for 50p, then maybe grab it for your collection. In 2001, a racing game based on the film turned up 4 years after the film's release, called New York Race. A little bit too late if you ask me. It gives you a chance to play as different characters from the film and various vehicles that featured throughout it as you race around locations from the movie. Graphically, it's very good and got above average reviews at the time. Not a bad game, but does get repetitive very quickly, so it's recommended to play it in short bursts. It's worth picking up if you see it floating around online. I fell in love with this movie when I first saw it. It's totally bonkers and looks amazing at the same time. It has that great European feel and sensibility to it. It's not based on a comic series or an existing sci-fi novel, so it doesn't suffer from being based on something else. It is its own thing, which I love. I used to play the video game Flashback a lot, and when I saw this, it felt like it was from the same universe, not knowing both are designed by French artists. It's rare nowadays to see something that is original and isn't a remake or a sequel. There are visual elements from other movies such as Blade Runner and Dune, but doesn't feel like a carbon copy. It feels fundamentally different and unique. Bruce Willis's character feels like someone from another time, like he has been dumped in the future and has to deal with it. With its crazy design and with an American as the hero, it feels a lot like the 1980 movie Flash Gordon. I do really like Bruce and Mila in the movie, but the scenes with Brian James and Ian Holmes always have me in stitches, and you know every time they pop up on screen, something funny is going to happen. I love it when Corbin attempts to hide Cornelius and forgets about him, and he nearly suffocates as the plastic cover slides over him. Ian Holmes' reaction is comedy gold. If I had to highlight its problems, and there aren't many in my eyes that affect the movie, you could argue about its overall pacing. At just over 2 hours long, the story may feel a little light for some. I love the diva sequence, and you could say it slows the movie down and doesn't really move the story along. Yeah, it cuts to Lilu attempting to get the stones, but it's really just an action sequence cut to the beat of the music. As you progress through the movie, you want to know more about the evil planet, referred to as Mr. Shadow, and Zorg's real intentions to help him. Zorg says his costs have tripled in his attempts to acquire the stones, but he appears to have plenty of wealth already. And does he really know Mr. Shadow's intentions to destroy the Earth? It's all left unexplained. Also, when he's on the phone with him, you can see this brownish black ooze run down his head. What is it? Is Zorg starting to sweat so that his hair dye is melting? Or has Mr. Shadow somehow oozed his way through the phone? The relationship between Lilu and Corbin is well written, but because of the age gap between the actors, it's hard to believe it works on screen. Bruce Willis is 21 years older than Mila, old enough to be her dad. At the end, when Cornelius tells Corbin to say he loves Lilu, it seems like he's been forced to say those words to save the planet, maybe because of the way Bruce plays Corbin. He does express his feelings for her when he chats with his buddy on the phone, so you know his feelings are legit, but the way he delivers his lines, you kind of don't believe him. Mila certainly is terrific in the film, and it's still her best performance. It's unfortunate she has since been doing these god-awful action movies. Her performance throughout the entire Resident Evil series is painfully bland. It's like all her acting talents have been zapped out of her by director and husband, Paul W.S. Anderson. Many critics weren't too keen on Chris Tucker's character. He was way over the top and spending the majority of the time screaming like a girl. It's funny in the film because he has this very flamboyant and campy image, but in a short space of time you realise he's a total womaniser and is obsessed with sex. I'm a big fan of Chris Tucker, and I thought he was great in Friday, Money Talks and Rush Hour. He's a very good comedian and also a good singer, even though singing is not his speciality. I don't think many people expected him to play a large part in the film, but once he turns up to welcome Corbin to the radio station, he is on screen for the rest of the movie. I don't personally have a problem with that because it's so funny watching him nearly lose his temper as he attempts to make Corbin interact with his listeners, but always gets a limited response from him.
So tell me, my man, you happy here in the big world?
I find it boring, really.
There had been talk of a sequel called Mr. Shadow being in development, but I believe this was just rumours, as Luc Besson said he had no desire to make a sequel, and the movie really doesn't lend itself to a follow-up. It ends with Mr. Shadow being defeated at the end, and the story ties everything up. If one was made, it would seem like a desperate attempt to cash in on the original, and besides, they left it a bit too late now to do one. Luc Besson has certainly produced more films than he has directed. Over the last 15 years he has produced tons of action movies, such as the Transporter series, Taxi films, Kiss of the Dragon and District 13 to name just a few. I remember when Angel A came out, which was the first movie he had directed in 5 years. He said it would be his last behind the camera, but obviously changed his mind and made Arthur and the Invisibles 2 years later. This year he has a new film coming out called Lucy, which looks very interesting. The Fifth Element clearly doesn't take itself too seriously and really pushes the comedy and craziness of the future. It's refreshing to see a big budget sci-fi film that doesn't play things so straight. I think it's probably one of the funniest big budget summer movies. The film isn't very heavy on the action either, which is very surprising to me. Yeah, it does have a number of explosive action pieces, but they're very much spaced out. It's really about the characters and their attempts to acquire the stones, all blended together with some fine comedic scenes. I don't think I've ever met anyone who disliked the movie or said bad things about it. Their usual response is that it's weird and totally mad, but to me that's a good thing. If you haven't seen this, then I recommend you go pick it up ASAP, especially on Blu-ray. The recent release has a new and improved transfer supervised by Luc Besson, so it's the best it's ever looked. I'd still love to see it on 35mm again someday. It's a movie that has to be seen on a big screen and not a laptop or portable device. So if you are watching your movies on your phone, then naughty naughty, shame on you. If you have seen this film and love it as much as I do, then I hope you've learnt something new and feel encouraged to watch it again.
How are the stones?
Fine. Fine, just fine. I'll have the 4 stones that you asked for any time now, but it wasn't easy. My costs have tripled.
Money is of no importance. I want the stones.
You must give her the stones.
Who?
The 5th element. The supreme being sent to Earth to save the universe.
Leo?
Yes. But she's more fragile than she seems. She needs your help.
No, stay with me.
And your love. Or she will die.
Oh no.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find more retrospective reviews by clicking on these videos.